Hello and welcome back to Pinstripe Pulse. It is mid-January. Is the Yankees roster done? I think we have a few more moves to go. Arbitration, rumors, and who plays the most at each position.
Find out.
Hello and welcome back to Pinstripe Pulse. My name is Liam. I'm joined once again by Jake. How's it going, man?
Not too shabby. Have some shoulder stuff going on. Getting the nice Frankie Montas treatment from my doctors right now. So that's always fun. But right back on it after that nice long holiday season.
So we had mentioned off air that you think you were injured late April, early May. Though given that we knew about Montas's injury at the deadline, who do you think got injured first, you or Frankie Montas?
I'll tell you that he got paid first because I do not get paid. Um, honestly, I think that he probably has been hurt since May, June, something along those lines. We knew about the injury in July. Honestly, me, because April, like I can guarantee that I was hurt by April 29th. That's when it happened. That's what you
I,
get for coming straight off a plane and then catching a game with zero warm up.
I hope you were injured first because you don't have the organization that we root for paying you millions of dollars about this injury that you did nothing about until now. But I'm glad that you're getting it checked out. We'll see if you can play any of the field coming up soon. Speaking of being paid and paying, Chris is looking for those league dues. So if you haven't gotten them to him yet already, I think I'm a little bit behind. I got to figure that out.
Oh boy, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. I got the uniform fee in, so we're cooking there. But that's the only important part. Let's be real.
Yeah.
Coming
So
from
this
someone
isn't
who's
the
on
what's that?
coming from someone who's on management.
Oh yeah. You should be responsible. I have an excuse.
Yeah.
Um, but enough of the Canes Pulse. That's our baseball team, the Hudson Hurricanes. We're getting into some Yankees talk. So it's been a little quiet in Yankees land, and I think a lot of that is around where the market is at for baseball and where the rosters are shaping up. Right now the Yankees are at 40 on their 40-man roster. So in theory, the team is full. We think there's a few possible upgrades, but it is plausible that the Yankees go in with the team that they have right now. But we're going to talk through some of those options where those upgrades might be. And we gave a bit of a preview. I think first off the jump is the Frankie Montas injury, who was our number 5 starter. And it felt really good for about a month after we signed Rodon, right? Looking at all those graphics, seeing Luis Severino as your 4 and Frankie Montas as your 5, I think was really nice for Yankees fans to share on Twitter and the Instagram stories to kind of rub in the face of how elite this pitching rotation can be. But the reality is, it seems like Montas is going to be out for at least a month. That's what we're told. Since the trade deadline, he obviously was a little bit hurt and he didn't perform well when he was healthy. And, what came first, chicken or the egg kind of situation. I'm going to think that Montas was dealing with an injury, which led to some of his ailments. And, with pitching, something that's so repeatable that relies on mechanics, just being off a little bit can contribute to that. But now it's looking like, we traded for Montas in early August. It's looking like we're not going to have Frankie Montas for about a year after that trade. And what does that value mean? And what does the back end of our rotation look like now? What are your initial thoughts about the Frankie Montas injury?
First of all, I do feel for the dude because like going through shoulder stuff is not fun. You just like you feel restricted in terms of your mobility and your ability to cock your arm back and actually throw. So I wouldn't see it as like a possibility that like I'm sure that he's been injured for a while and he just never seemed like the second that he got to New York City, he was coming from a funeral, right? So like there was already that weighing on his mind. It just never seemed like he found his footing in terms of talking to the media. He just looked very uncomfortable from the get-go. And people said, like, oh no, another Sonny Gray situation, especially having that Oakland A's tie. And I mean, you can't write people off for having that feeling at this point. Just because I feel like the Yankees should have done a little more due diligence when it came to this injury. Shoulders are very complex. a lot of different things can be going wrong with him. And it sounds like at best he's got some tendonitis, which is shoulder inflammation. At worst, it could be a ligament injury. So if that's the case, we traded for a pitcher who's not going to be able to do anything for us because he's only there for one more year. And then he's gone, and we traded away let's be real, our best pitching assets for him. Ken Waldichuk is probably going to be at least a 3 or 4,
Ken
if that,
Waldichuk might be their best pitcher,
1 or a 2 at this point.
which is saying more about Oakland than it is about us. But Ken Waldichuk debuting recently in baseball, being a 2 or 3 on an MLB team, like we can't take away from the fact that Ken Waldichuk is a really high level prospect and how well JP Sears performed for us throughout the year. Like he was a prospect that proved it at the major league level in a small sample size and has continued to be really good for them, for Oakland.
He gave up very few runs from what I remember with the Yankees too. So like this is like they've got their 1 and 2 for Oakland right now, like perfectly set up. And even Luis Medina is a guy that like we forget about all the time, but he was really good as well. So it makes it a lot harder to pull the trigger on a Brian Reynolds trade, for example, when things like that happen. But also at the same time, you can't really get mad at the Yankees for making that trade because you know what also doesn't happen if that trade is made. You don't trade Jordan Montgomery for Harrison Bader. And I think at this point we all agree that that was a great move to make, because Bader was our main contributor and our sole contributor essentially throughout the playoffs, other than maybe Anthony Rizzo.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation across the board. I don't fault the Yankees for making that trade because I think if you look at the high level potential of Frankie Montas in even last year's postseason, we signed Rodon now, who's going to be our second ace. But if Frankie Montas does what he's proven he's able to do on a pretty consistent level over a large sample the last few years with Oakland, him performing in the playoffs could have changed the tides of where we were at, just dominant. And Sevy and Nestor pitched really, really well in the postseason. So it's ultimately we didn't hit and we got outclassed by Houston. But I think it changes the tenor of the rest of the season if we don't have 5+ outings where Montas gives up 6 to 8 runs within the first 3 innings. I think it changes the momentum of the team. Like that was a real fall from grace in August where the team had to rebuild themselves. I think the team could have benefited from cruising maybe to 105 wins, probably still the number 2 seed, but a bit more comfortable. The Judge home run race maybe gets covered up a little bit earlier, even though he was tearing it up while the team was losing. So it's really unfortunate, and I think we can only project. But if the Yankees looked at this injury and they saw it before they traded for Montas, now looking at the opportunity cost of not having Ken Waldichuk and JP Sears, not that we're improving the Oakland A's right now, we're not concerned about them, but losing them as assets, if not as a value to this team, when the Pirates are looking for a massive haul for Brian Reynolds, which is our glaring hole. And we have plenty of infield and outfield prospects that are top level in all MLB circles, but the rumor is that they're looking for pitching. And we might get beat for Brian Reynolds or just not be able to get him because our top 2 pitching prospects went for an injured number 5 that we might not even see until the All-Star break, if at all, this year.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm under the assumption right now that the Pirates haven't been offered a package centered around one of our top prospects yet. And I think the reality is that if we did have those guys from the Montas trade still here, like he would have been Reynolds and Bednar would have been a Yankee by now. I think it's just at that point where like we had so much leverage to make that move, and now we're just kind of sitting and waiting to see if they end up kind of pushing back on their previous like King's ransom ask, which was no one's going to give the Pirates what they want right now. They undervalue Reynolds to the point where they don't see him like in terms of dollar value as a superstar. When in reality, his camp wants, I think it was like 5 years, 120 million or 120, something along those lines. So kind of similar ilk as your Brandon Nimmo's. And if you're trying to compare like a current player that just hit the free agent market, obviously he's got more service time under his belt. And then Reynolds has 3 more years, I think, of arbitration at this point. So that's kind of what you're paying for with prospect capital at this point if you're another team. But it's just a tough situation because I think the Yankees are that's their the prize jewel right now. That's the guy that they would ultimately like to move for because he's the one who rounds out that lineup so well. But at the same time, they're not going to sit around and wait forever. And I do think eventually the dollars or the ask from the Pirates does drop. I think that happens closer to the All-Star break, just because something's got to give. He doesn't want to be there, and I don't think he ultimately fits with their timeline of guys like a Brian Hayes and then also O'Neill Cruz, like those guys really coming into their own. So I think he will be moved at some point, but I don't think the Yankees are just going to just sit on their ass and like do nothing and just roll out Hicks again. That's not viable at this point, and I'm pretty sure that Cashman is feeling the pressure of like heads will roll if Hicks goes out there again to start. So at minimum, I see a move of a Jurickson Profar or someone along those lines to be a stopgap.
Yeah, and we'll get into more of the left field as we have for the last few episodes now. But going to the pitching rotation. So we looked at those graphics, like I was saying before. Frankie Montas, high level number 5 starter, looking at, I think, the deepest rotation or one of the deepest rotations in baseball, and looking at, all right, Domingo Germán, Clark Schmidt, Luis Heel as our 6 through 8 options. That's not too bad. Now, with this one move of Montas being hurt indefinitely, I'm going to say he's back no earlier than May 7th. I think it's going to be more like late June, July.
Yeah, that's closer
Um,
to the All Star break for sure.
yeah. And with the opportunity for relapse and whatnot, like with what Montas showed injured down the stretch last year, I think the Yankees are going to be ultra conservative with his injury, where they're not going to push him back because, you know, if he's not 100% healthy, I don't think he's worth it. I don't think he's a better pitcher than Domingo Germán, how he performed last year. He's definitely a better pitcher than Domingo Germán, but I'm going
Talent
to
wise,
assume
yeah.
talent wise, yeah. I'm going to assume that he was hurt, and I don't want him throwing innings for us if he's not 100% healthy. Like, I'd rather him just rehab. And if that means he pitches for 6 weeks before the playoffs, like, so be it. But I think we're not going to see him for a long time. He won't be built up. What do you think our rotation looks like now after number 4?
And that's the thing is like you feel really confident with those first four, and then after that, it's I feel like they really want to give Clark Schmidt the nod just because he is their homegrown guy that they've been high on for a while, and he was one of the few top prospects that's still around to this point. And like you wish you could say that you can see a Davy Garcia coming in, but at this point he's not reliable anymore. He got his shot in 2020 was excellent, and then after that he lost it. And it does sound like he spiked his velo a little bit, but it sounds like if he does come back, he might be more of a relief option. So I just don't think that's viable as well. There are a few guys in the system. I think Johnny Brito is one of the relievers that's in AAA right now, who is supposed to be ready for 2023. So I think him and then Crook are two guys that could potentially make an impact this season, from what I've been hearing about other people that are big on the Yankees prospects. Brito specifically, I think, is one internally that could be an option. However, I think that as weird as it to say, like I think that a Michael Wacha might be someone who's not out of the realm of possibility at this point, depending on what his ask is. He was pretty good for the Red Sox last season.
He was pretty good. Um, I don't, I'd be so interested to see if the Yankees go the trade or free agent route. I think
Yeah,
the one thing that's going to keep them from doing it, I think if Montas was confirmed out for 2 to 3 months, they'd be likelier to do it. But if you go internal with some of the guys, I mean, reading off some of the names that are on the 40-man starting
yeah,
pitchers, Randy Vasquez, Yoendrys Gomez, Matt Crook, Devi, Luis Heel, I believe, is not on here because he's still injured, but
Devin,
he's
yeah.
he's he's on the 40, as well as Johnny Brito. I
Mm-hmm.
think depending on what the injury looks like, I mean, I'm sure they'll know more, in a month as pitchers and catchers, they'll know more about the talent they have for like the 2, 3 weeks that some of those younger guys are up. And they'll know more about his injury to make those decisions then. That's not a right now decision.
Yeah,
But I think they'd be more likely to stay internal unless they straight up sold on him and went the trade route. I don't think there's anyone on the free agent route. I mean, Waka's a good shout, honestly, but I don't think there's
Walker, yeah.
anyone free agent wise that they think is worth losing that flexibility potentially. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that they don't want to take a hit payroll wise too. So like obviously if you go with the free agent route, you're giving up money. Whereas if you go trade, you're giving up prospects or current players on the team. And there is one guy that we'll get to in a little bit after arbitration, or like the current arbitration situation that might be now on the trade block, depending on how that goes. But I think that there are personally better arms on the trade market, but they would have to get very creative with it. This is one of those times where Cashman could come out of nowhere with like a big random move. Like, let's say he gets someone from the Chicago White Sox. You know, like there are a few different teams that are fringe that aren't quite playoff teams that could be looking to sell. That we're not really thinking about at this point. But obviously, like if you're thinking about the trade route, Miami is the first team that really kind of hits you, just because they have such a surplus of arms at this point with the Johnny Cueto acquisition. I think they've got four guys essentially that they're shopping around. Obviously, the only one that's not available right now is Alcantara because he's disgusting, and there's no reason to trade him. The second Kim Mang trades him, that's when all hell like boils over.
Sandy
Uh,
for Cole, straight up.
straight up.
Not
You
even. They wouldn't take the Miami wouldn't take that deal. Cole gets paid too
no.
much money.
Would you take that?
No, no.
Yeah. No. It's a
I
tough
think
one.
that's a lose-lose trade, honestly.
Dude,
I
he
love
pitched
Sandy.
222 innings or whatever last season. That's crazy.
Cole eats that. That's it's a really underrated aspect of Cole.
Yeah.
Sandy didn't even like. Well, I
This was a
almost
good
said Sandy
season.
didn't throw that much. Sandy threw a lot last year, which was part of his value that they let him rip. But that was the first time, like you said.
Yeah, no,
And
I saw people like talking shit about Cole on Twitter. And it was mainly just I think it was a few like Red Sox fans and then Houston fans comparing like Christian Javier, and I'm like, look at Javier's innings compared to Cole's innings in the last 10 years. Every season, I think he's had maybe 4 or 5 seasons over 200 innings at this point in his career. Like no one does that nowadays. So the amount of value you get from a starting pitcher, like I think it's the easiest way to break it down is like through innings pitched, strikeouts, and then maybe ERA if you want to throw that in there as like the big three. And Cole does all three of those things at an elite level. So anyone that has anything to say about him not being like a true ace for that reason, just like you got to reevaluate what you're looking at. But when it comes to Miami, though, they do have a few guys. Like obviously, we've loved Pablo Lopez, Justin J. Ray, like really does love him as well. And the compelling thing about him is like I was listening to Just Baseball. We talked about this off of the air, but those guys were breaking down how like he's not even the most compelling arm because you know what you're getting out of him. He's the safe option, and he only has a few more years of control. Whereas like guys like Trevor Rogers and then I think it was Edward Cabrera all like have devastating stuff, and they have like I think 4 or 5 years of control left, and it's just like you don't know you've got a lot of upside, but you don't really know what that downside is going to look like because of potential injury, and then also just they're not proven as much. So like there are some really interesting arms that can be thrown in there. And the Yankees do have a surplus of middle infielders, and that's one thing that Miami's kind of been lacking throughout the years. And
so
yeah,
to get into that a bit more, we'll do some housekeeping and then get into the player that you've been teasing. So the Yankees settled with 8 out of their 9 arbitration eligible players. They had previously come to terms with IKF, strangely, right after the season ended 1 year for 6 million. The Yankees were like, "Yep, we want IKF back." But however, some of the other mainstays they left go until the arbitration deadline this past week. So they settled with 8 out of the 9 eligible players. That included Michael King for 1.3 million. All of these are 1 year deals to avoid arbitration. And for anyone who doesn't know, the arbitration process is where basically the player and their agency presents a value that they think they're worth, and then the team presents a value that they think that player is worth, and then a private arbiter, like a judge type scenario, they literally go to court, determines which of those two numbers best fits the player statistically relative to the market. So that's a court process that you don't really want to go through with your players. So the Yankees settled most of these deals to avoid that arbitration process. And if you remember, Aaron Judge almost went through it in June before the Yankees settled, days before the deadline. That was pushed back into the season because of the lockout. But Michael King for 1.3, Johnny Loaiska for 2.3, Wandy Peralta 3.3, Nestor Cortez signed a 3.3 million, and he came out on Twitter and he said some really nice things. Nestor Cortez has been a really good starting pitcher for the last 3 years, getting paid about 500,000, 450,000, whatever the major league minimum is. So he got a big payday, and I appreciate how much he appreciated. That's
Yeah.
life altering money, even though it's relatively low when we talk about these professional players. I would take 3.2 million. I'm sure you would also, Jake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and you also have to take into obviously with my pre-arb situation going on here, going into potentially surgery, that would be pretty nice right now. But like on top of that, you've got New York State taxes, and then I believe you pay tax in every state that you played in throughout the season.
Yep.
So there's a lot that goes into it, and the fact that he's making, I think the league minimum right now 770, yeah, so 770,000 after the new CBA.
Yep.
That's a huge step up for him, and he deserved every penny.
Yeah. And same with guys, Clay Holmes, 3.3, Trevino, 2.4, Higgy, 1.4, Montas got 7.5, Herman. But the one person they didn't settle with was Gleyber Torres. And right now, the Yankees and Gleyber Torres are a little bit split. The Yankees think Gleyber is worth 9.7. These are the reports. And Gleyber's camp thinks he's worth 10.2. I imagine maybe they'll eventually settle before the court date. But they've decided to go through the arbitration process. And I think that's interesting because one of the reasons I thought that the Yankees settled with IKF is to make his trade value more certain.
Yeah.
Teams generally wouldn't want to take on a player that they have to go to court with immediately. And that would be the case for any team taking on Gleyber, unless the Yankees look to shop him until after that arbitration court date. But Gleyber is that player you were alluding to, from our position of surplus to the Marlins' position of need. I mean, right now, the Marlins roster resource, they have Gene Segura at third. After trading Miguel Rojas to LA, they have Jazz Chisholm at second and Joey Wendell as their shortstop. Gleyber Torres would move Chisholm to short, which is where he came up. And then Gleyber would probably play second because he's a better fielder than Gene Segura.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think of a Gleyber Torres deal, like for Pablo Lopez, like for anyone on that Marlins staff, like we had previewed in November?
I think they should have pulled the trigger on it personally back in July, like because it seems like they had the framework for a deal in place. I think it had to include Peraza though, which is why the Yankees didn't want to move on it. But it feels imminent that the infield this year is going to at some point include Volpe at second base and Peraza at short. Like that the writing is on the wall at this point. They're labeling Volpe Mr. Yankee at this rate. And they clearly love Peraza because they did give him playoff run. He eventually did replace IKF, but it was too late at that point. But every time that Peraza was on the field, he dazzled. It's clear as day that they're going to be running out of spaces for infielders. And with Donaldson having such a tough contract to move, I think they're still trying to move it. Don't get me wrong. But obviously, Gleyber is the one that has the most value out of anyone at this point that is majorly proven. He's going to give you at least a 115 WRC plus, something along those lines. He's at least 15%, 20% better than the average player. But he has his ups and his downs, and I think that New York City sometimes gets to be too much for him. So this could be a good opportunity for him to go to a bit of a smaller, more laid-back market. I think he's a perfect match for the Marlins. If we're being like just in terms of an organizational fit, I think he'll feel a little bit less pressure and play a little bit more loose than he does in New York City. I think it's an outstanding fit. And I think that there are plenty of pieces that could go back and forth on return for. And especially like, do you fully trust Jazz Chisholm being your main like player in the like positionally speaking for the Marlins right now? He's not played a full season yet. He has supreme talent potentially,
Or Joey
but he's
Wendell as
also
your lockdown shortstop after Miguel Rojas, who has been an elite defender there for the past 5+ years.
yeah. So you're losing that big staple that you had, and like I think Gleyber, even though he is 26, 25 years old at this point, he's accumulated enough experience to be a veteran presence for guys like Jazz Chisholm to look up to. So I think that he provides more value overall for the Marlins than the Yankees. So I really hope that the Yankees see it the same way. And I think they do, because like that, they were hesitant to pull the trigger on a $10 million deal. So there clearly is something that's holding them back from just committing to him.
Yeah, and I generally agree with you. So I'm going to bring up a counterpoint from outside so that we can have some interesting discourse here. Someone that we listen to a bunch is prominent in Yankees land is obviously John Boy, from Talking Yanks podcast, Talking Baseball. So recently there have been Glaber rumors have been big on Twitter, I think for valid reasons, like what we just outlined. Another part of that is that Glaber is going to get in the area of $10 million, which right now, by most projections, would put the Yankees at around 271, 272 million, including the major league minimums from the rest of the 40-man guys who are like on high options, like uh Florial, Oswaldo, Peraza, Volpe, whoever that may be.
Yeah.
So that puts the Yankees dangerously close to that 273 threshold, which is that second level tax threshold. Now, where John Boy comes from, he disagrees that we should trade Glaber. He thinks that we should keep Glaber at all costs. And what his view is, DJ's injury uncertainty, which is really valid. Apparently, all signs are pointing good. He didn't need surgery, so he'll be ready
Yeah.
for the year. But we saw how DJ being down really impacted this team. So if we didn't have Glaber last year, who plays second? My answer to that is I'm ready for Anthony Volpe, but it's also that's a new level prospect. In a team that's in win now mode, Glaber is proven to be like a 700, 750 OPS level guy, even though there are ups and downs that go from 900 to 550 in between there. So Glaber kind of holds it down with the uncertainty of DJ's injury.
Yeah.
And also John Boyd, which is a valid point. He doesn't like to think about the money being a big issue. He kind of just wishes that the Steinbrenners who have billions and billions of dollars would be fine going a little bit over that second tax threshold when Steve Cohen is paying
Yeah.
350 plus million. Um, so I see where he's coming from there. So like in my headspace, I think Glaber is our most valuable asset in terms of someone who's in a position of surplus, who's major league proven, who's young and has a lot of upside for a young team like Miami. So that's where I see he fits. But I understand the point of DJ and not wanting to part ways with Glaber.
Yeah, and also one thing about Glaber that is a huge plus, and this also ties into that previous point as well, is that he stays healthy.
Yep.
And that's one of the biggest things you can ask for from a player nowadays. Like he can give you 150 games easy. Which
Which you
is
cannot
very,
take for granted.
yeah,
We
it's
give
a lot.
Glaber a lot of slack, but that's huge. That's one of
Yeah.
the most valuable parts of a player.
That's why Robbie Cano was so important for us back in the early to late 2000s,
161
so
games every year.
exactly. That's such a satisfying number to see on the back of a baseball card or a baseball reference too. Like, oh, this is so satisfying.
He always got off one of the last series. I
Yeah.
distinctly remember from like '08 till like 2012, basically Robbie Cano played like 158 to like 161 games. Never 162, I think. Maybe he got one of them in there.
Matsui had the 163 game season. I was like, you're a psycho, dude.
He's like in the modern game, he would never. He'd be playing 135,
Yeah,
maybe 150 with DHing.
easy.
That's so funny. Here we go. Uh oh my God, it went back even farther. 2007, 160, '08, 159, '09, 161 led the league. 10, 160, 11, 159, 12, 161, 13, 160, 14, 157 with Seattle.
I love it. And then the steroids hit.
Yeah.
No, it's like when you, I don't know, when you can see that a player puts that much into being on the field, it's definitely a huge asset. So I'm sure that's another reason the Yankees are kind of trigger shy at this point to pull something right now. Although I think the fact that Montas, so what scared me the most about the Montas news is that apparently he's 6 to 8 weeks behind schedule, which is a significant amount of time if you think about how long he's been shut down for. So that gives me no hope that he's going to be back at this point.
And that's 2 months into pitchers and catchers. Like pitchers and catchers report two
In a
weeks
month,
early
yeah,
just so they can throw, and then the rest of the team comes because then they get into their work. So if
yeah.
Montas is realistically going to be starting his spring training program as the Yankees are starting opening day, he's going to be about 2 months plus behind.
Yeah, so I feel like they're really feeling the pressure right now to make something happen, and I'm sure that they would be okay with going in with Mingo and with Clark kind of platooning each other. But at the same time, like if you can get a proven starter, who could be a fresh take for the organization, especially someone who would be a new arm that hasn't pitched too much in the AL East, just to give a different look, I think that's worth the shot. Those Miami pitchers are way too compelling for me to just like pass up on.
So who would be your pitcher of choice? Because we got two lefties. There's Luzardo, there's Trevor Rogers. And then on the board, I would say Edward Cabrera and Pablo Lopez. I don't know how they feel about Braxton Garrett, who's listed as their number 6.
I
Um,
know Garrett's also supposed to be pretty talented too. I think that I would have. We have two lefties already that I love in this rotation, and as I am a lefty, as much as I love lefties, I don't think we need another one right now. Although, like, I wouldn't be mad about it. But I think Pablo gives you that stability that's very important right now, and that's what you're like. The lack or the uncertainty is what scares Yankees fans and the Yankees the most at this moment. I think Pablo gives you 180 innings easy. So that's the guy that I think he would also cost the least because he's the least amount of control. So he's a pretty easy no-brainer for me. Although I would be very happy to see someone like an Edward Cabrera just because the upside is so high. But
are you
also,
looking? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, are you looking at Pablo Lopez's baseball reference right now?
I am not, but
Okay.
I'm going to do it
How
now.
many innings? No, don't look it up. How many
Okay,
innings do you think he threw last year?
185.
You said 180. He threw 180.0 innings last year.
There you go.
So that was a good pull. That was I that just caught me by surprise because just opened it up and then you said 180.
Well, and like just think about it that way is like how many did Tyone give us? Like 170 last season,
Yep.
something like that, maybe. Like this is a step up from that, and he's like I love JMO, but he's a better pitcher than that as well. And
Yep.
he's young; he's 26, 27 years old, so he
And
has
controllable.
upside. And like get him with Matt Blake, this dude can really kind of skyrocket. I mean, granted, Marlins all credit to them; they've got an outstanding pitching staff, and the way that they run their pitching development is probably better than most teams. But Matt Blake working with him on spin rate and things along those lines, like that, he can really benefit being around guys like Garrett Cole and then Carlos Rodon. And also Nestor Cortez, because he's kind of got a little bit of everything. He is a finesse guy, but he has some power in there, that arm as well. So I think that he is a really nice blend of what the Yankees are working with at the moment.
On Tuesday, April 4th, I am going to see Yankees versus Phillies. That is their 5th game of the season. Who throws the first pitch of that game in pinstripes?
I'm gonna dream big and say Pablo.
Pablo Lopez? Our
Yeah.
friend Pablo Lopez?
Friend of the pod.
Friend of the pod, Pablo Lopez. He just doesn't know it yet. Um, we got to get it. If he becomes a Yankee, we actually have to FaceTime him.
Oh my god.
Um, shout
J
out to
Ray
J
playing
Ray for
that.
that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, is Lopez gonna be on the WBC team? Probably.
I
If Team
think
Venezuela is going full,
I'm pretty
uh,
sure he is.
yeah. Is he Puerto Rican and Venezuelan, or just Venezuelan? What was J Ray's connection to him?
Wasn't it a family connection or something along those
Yeah,
lines? And J Ray is Puerto Rican.
yeah, and they were. I think his family was in Puerto Rico, but
Yeah.
Lopez is listed as being born in Venezuela. Um, so I
Well,
imagine he probably represent Venezuela too.
yeah. Is
Interesting.
is Glaber playing for Venezuela?
I think so. It's been hard to. I've been trying to find rosters and do like a bit
Yeah.
of a WBC preview. Really, the U.S. and that's because like we're in the U.S. obviously, but like the USA team is the only one where I can find really clear marketing for like they put out the graphics of like who's in like their lineups and everything. Whereas for a lot of the other ones, like DR, even Japan, like there wasn't an official announcement for Shohei that we saw. Shohei was like, "Oh, I'll play," and then next week it was him in a Japan jersey, which
Yeah.
Japan would be foolish to not have the best baseball player in the world on their team. So I'm glad that Shohei is going to be at the WBC.
That's a wise move for marketing, I'd say. Did you see the picture of the DR lineup?
No.
It's looking disgusting. I think it was like
Committed
Machado.
lineup too?
Yeah, well, they didn't have like they didn't make like form like a 1 through 9, but like they had
Hmm.
catcher first base. I know like
Yeah.
Gary was at catcher.
Who's their worst player?
Yeah, because Machado's at like 3B.
Yeah.
I think was it Tatis at short? It was crazy like the way that they
Tatis
had.
isn't eligible. I think they would have Wander Franco probably.
It was one of the high end shortstops.
And then J Ram at second.
Yeah,
Vlad Guerrero at first, probably.
yeah,
Damn, I wish Vladdy played for Canada. I know he's not like culturally aligned with Canada. He was just born in Montreal because
yeah.
senior played for the Expos, but that would be fun. Like Vladdy and Freddie Freeman out of nowhere on Team Canada.
It's the same picture.
Yeah.
That would be a
Then
good one.
what Soto in the
Yeah, so
outfield, Starling
and
Marte.
yeah,
And J Rod. Is J Rod Dominican?
yeah, no, yeah, J Rod's playing center.
Jesus. That's a good team. I
Gary's
don't think you
literally
can
playing
name me
center.
9 Americans that beat that team. Like, obviously it's baseball,
Yeah.
but
Also, good luck to Ottavino. He'll be out there playing for Team USA, and then so will Alex Katz for Team Israel. So
we got
shout
to get
out.
them on before they go. I'm really interested in how that's going to play out, what their
Let's
experience
try
is
for
like.
next week. I'll talk to them, see if we can get something going.
Especially Team Israel. Are they in the Japan Korea region for the group stage?
I haven't looked at any of the group settings at all, or
Yeah.
like I need to really look through the brackets just because I always forget to do that when it approaches, just because you get so wrapped up with like free agent stuff and you get wrapped up with the like the off season
And then
that it's
Japan
just so
throws
easy to
off the time
forget.
zones. So like
Yeah.
it's an MLB network game at like 6 in the morning.
Oh, great! It's like
And
the
it's
World
like
Cup all over.
Netherlands versus, I don't know, like Italy. Or
It's
like
literally
Netherlands Israel is honestly a game that's like a 5 a.m. start on MLB network.
it's literally World Cup all over again, except for baseball.
I'm all in. All in. World tournaments, dude, that I'm huge for. I was upset that I didn't know Pablo Lopez, his nationality right off the bat, because with soccer, I know that for every single player. And
Slacking.
I know. Well, because baseball, they don't play internationally consistently. Whereas
Yeah,
for
that's true.
soccer, it's like at an international level, like I know where every player plays. Like give me any player that you can name, I would tell you. And that part of that is like FIFA.
Oh, this is
Um,
one other thing that we can talk about real quick is expansion teams.
oh yeah.
Completely forgot about that until now.
I saw a tidbit of Rosenthal's article that just came out talking about. I think the Vegas expansion is going to happen, but apparently they're waiting to see if Oakland renews with the A's, which I think is unlikely at this point. As
Yeah,
cool as that stadium mock-up has looked, I don't think they're going to go through with the county.
no, they might as well just make the move to Vegas now. And I think that two fresh cities for two fresh teams would be the best call. I think Nashville is a given. It when you have Mattingly backing you, like that's going to happen. Um, and then like to me, the next two cities that were most compelling, just because I had got a slight bias to one of them, is like New Orleans. I think would be like so much fun. Especially like after like they're finally like getting back into the swing of things after the hurricanes and all that stuff. It's just also a great city to visit. So I think that like baseball there would be revitalized. And then Portland would be a lot of fun too. So like I think two of those three gets the nod.
So, I know Vegas is fun and good for money and stuff. Part of me is like, it's so hot in the summer in Vegas, and
Yeah.
I don't think that the Vegas going crowd is necessarily like the baseball loving crowd. Like I think baseball people are gonna like they would go to New Orleans, they would go to Nashville, to even like Louisville. Um, I don't think Vegas gives as much upside as they're thinking. I know it's gonna be money and a good market and stuff. But part of me feels like New Orleans and Nashville are great options because I think that opens up the door to an MLB team in Puerto Rico or the DR. If you have
Puerto
like a
Rico.
Southeast division,
Yeah.
because once you get like think of like the AL West right now between Houston to Seattle and stuff. If you can get a division that's New Orleans, Atlanta, Tampa, Miami, and like
Even-
San Jose or
Yeah,
Santo Domingo. Like,
you can even get Mexico,
yeah,
like right on the like literally they shares a border with
Mexico
Texas.
in the
So
Southwest. Have you
yeah,
seen that the stadium they're building for the World Cup? I forget if it's in Guadalajara or Tijuana. And it opens up on one side and you just see like the mountain range. It's the most beautiful thing. I have to
uh,
show you the mock-up for it.
that's epic.
Um,
I'm sure
but
Matt's like seen some pictures of it too, since his
yeah.
family's from there.
Yeah, I think Mexico City is pretty deep for a team. That would be a far divisional trip. But like
Yeah,
Tijuana, Guadalajara, even Baja California, like we know how like San Diego does really well supporting the team down there.
yeah,
I think they would go pretty crazy for it.
dude, the atmosphere would be insane.
Yeah. So I love it. I love expansion, especially with a balanced schedule. I mean, like, we grew up with the same divisions with very similar playoff formats. Like it's gonna be a bit of an adjustment, but you know, uh, we'll get over it. I'm not gonna miss the division rivalry with the Tampa Bay Rays if we don't play them as much anymore.
Oh no, we
Um,
don't have to play the Orioles 32 times in a season.
yeah.
Like,
Or I
boo.
don't know, maybe not the Tampa Bay Rays. They become like the New Orleans Soul or something. Or,
The
but
New Orleans Crawdads.
yeah, they gotta go. Good names. They
Oh,
gotta
absolutely.
interesting names.
Like New Orleans used to have some of the crazy, like so they were the Zephyrs for minor league for a while, and then they were like the
That's a
Baby
good name.
Cakes or something like that because it was like based off king cakes at Mardi Gras.
What's the
Um,
Nashville AAA team?
er, is that the team that they're trying to expand right now? The Nashville Stars.
I think so. Yeah, they
That's the
get
one that
huge
had it.
crowds.
Yeah. Well, that's
Nashville's a baseball town. We went there and like we saw the Dollies play. Oh, excuse me. We saw the Dollies. They played online. We saw them online that they played in person there.
yeah,
But they get crowds of like 5 to 7,000, which is better than Oakland. Like,
it's amazing.
yeah.
And
So Nashville's a good town. I like that. Nashville and New Orleans, I would be my two probably.
yeah, for sure. And I like you can't go wrong with those like southern metropolitan cities just because
Austin.
like people like to have a fun. Austin would be awesome too.
Austin's a massive market. We're gonna be there. We'll see. We'll scope it out for you guys.
Check out all the Sandlot fields and see what we can cook up.
Yeah, how good of a baseball market is this?
Yeah.
And our only barometer will be how many people come to see our amateur baseball game.
Apparently, there's supposed to be a crowd. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, from the pictures I'm pretty excited. There's gonna be like a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's been progressively more and more because I feel the dreams there was a good bunch of people because
Hmm.
there was a wedding there one day, the day that we went, and people just come to like tour.
Yeah.
So we were just playing. Um,
We
so like
thrive off all the extracurriculars that go on around the
yeah,
baseball.
yeah. So I'm excited.
Oh yeah.
Um, all right, back to some Yankees talk. I think really we hit most of it. I know we talked about left field very minimally this episode. Where do you think we're at for left field? I know you mentioned Brian Reynolds before.
My theory is that Reynolds is still like the crown jewel. Like this is the guy that they want. He's the guy that like in an ideal world they land him. But I think that as the days go on, it's more likely that he's not going to be a Yankee by opening day. I think that eventually there is still a chance for him to become one, especially at the trade deadline. We can revisit that. But Jurickson Profar seems to be like the main free agent that's left that the Yankees have looked like. I know Adam Duvall signed with the Red Sox,
Yep.
and Tommy Pham, who I never saw as a fit for the Yankees, signed with the Mets today. So, like all signs, if you're looking at free agents, point to Profar being that guy. They've liked him for a long time. Cashman's liked him for a long time. He had a sneaky, solid season last year, like I think 11% better per OPS plus than the regular player. And he's versatile, switch batter, can bat from both sides. He brings some speed and some just fun and excitement to the table. It makes sense. And if that's the case, then you have to clear some space on the 40 man, which would get me pretty excited because that probably means an Aaron Hicks or someone along those lines is getting moved. And I think that we can all agree at this point that it's time for Hicks to part ways with the Yankees or vice versa, just because it seems like that relationship is kind of run its course, to put it lightly.
Yeah, roster resource on Fangraphs is listening to Yankees fans right now. because they have our shortstop as Oswald Peraza and our left fielder as Oswaldo Cabrera, who is not necessarily who we want in left field, Oswaldo, although we love him. But that puts IKF and Higgy. Sorry, Higgy is always going to be on the bench. IKF and Hicks, both on the bench. Interestingly, they have DJ on the bench. They have Glaber starting over him. We know that like DJ on the bench doesn't mean that DJ's on the bench.
Yeah,
Um, he might start out hurt. We'll see. Like I would slot him in opening day, third base.
I
I
was
don't.
gonna say the same thing. Like if DJ is fully healthy and he's looking good, like there's no reason that he should be a bench piece. Donaldson, on the other hand, has not proven anything with the bat at this point. So I think that he needs to earn the trust to be out there every day. Whereas DJ, at least when he is healthy, he was one of the best players on the team last year, up until that foot injury. So I it doesn't make any sense for me to like bench him at this point, especially since he played pristine defense at third as well. So it's not like he's shaky over there. He held his own really well.
Yeah. Um, I want to get into a bit of an exercise, but before I do, I'll give my thoughts on the
Yeah,
left field situation. I think based on the rumors, obviously, I haven't heard any trades from the Pirates personally, so I don't know who they're asking for. But based on the rumors, I think Reynolds is valued too high right now. And I think that's smart business by the Pirates. They have so much control of him. They have him for this year, which is I think his third year of pre-arb on
yeah,
9 million. Yeah, and I don't think he even qualified for Super 2, interestingly enough.
that's surprising.
Or is this his first year of real ARB that they bought out? I think it's
They
his first
bought
year of
out
real ARB.
they bought out 2 years, right? And
Bought out
then
2 years.
yeah,
So after at the end of 2023, he is contracted for 2 more years or 1 year. I think it's two more.
I think two more.
Yeah. So they have a lot of basically what I'm trying to say, they have a lot of control over Reynolds. I think the Pirates are right to hedge their bets, say we're not trading him unless we get this big deal. And I think they can hold out on their laurels for when it comes to late July. There's going to be 4 or 5 teams that are in it who are like, we can win the World Series, and probably 5 more that are like, I think that we can guarantee a playoff spot with an all-star outfielder
Yeah,
who would be willing to give that package away. And I think they're in their right mind. I think teams are in their right mind to not want to give up that much at the beginning of the season, and let it play out. I wouldn't mind the Yankees doing that per se. See how the prospects develop. See what Oswaldo does. I can't have Hicks be my left fielder. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I think Profar works. I wouldn't want to give him more than a 1 year deal. If we sign Profar and we trade for Reynolds, like I think that would be fine too. Profar isn't outstanding defensively in left field. He does offer versatility, but he hasn't done that in a few years, and we don't need that from him anymore.
yeah.
But he does grade out well with the bat. I mean, how many switch hitting left fielders can we have on one team? The Yankees are playing that game right now. If they sign Profar and they keep Oswaldo and they keep Hicks. No, Oswaldo's not a left fielder, which I kind of
No,
want to get him out of that conversation anyway. That's why we want to sign one.
he
So
was bad there. Like he was not a
yeah.
good left fielder. He was great at right field. He was fantastic over there. He played it seamlessly. He played all of the infield positions seamlessly, even first base.
Mhm.
Left field is a different story altogether. You can tell he was just uncomfortable and taking weird routes, running into people. Like nothing looked natural.
Yeah. And listen, I'm not a professional athlete, but I grew up I'm a trained outfielder and I
Yeah,
played at Yankee Stadium before, and it's huge. It's
man.
daunting and
Yeah,
it's huge. As someone who's really comfortable, like my position I'm most comfortable with is center field. I think I spoke about it last episode about how the
yeah,
reads are a bit truer. If you're adjusting to outfield life and one of your first venues that you're playing at is Yankee Stadium, who during the where during the day they have a killer sun coming over left field. You might remember Johnny Damon always wearing like his flip up sunglasses.
yeah. The visor glasses. Yep.
Yeah, because that would really kill him. And then even at night or those mid afternoon games where in the DS where he and Hicks collided, that was like an awkward sun angle. Like I was there. It was a weird time for a game at Yankee Stadium. I think that's really underrated, and you have to understand that even pro athletes can't adapt that well as much as we command it from him. So him being our 140 game left fielder, I don't see that as ideal.
one thing about Profarts too is he has an elite strikeout percentage. I think he's at like 14 or 15%, something like that on last season, which is like well above average. I think the average strikeout rate was like 21, 22%, 23, something in that ballpark. So he's at least 6% lower than that, which, I mean, let's be real, the Yankees struck out a fuck ton against the Astros. Like, I think they had, what, 52 strikeouts or something like that in the ALCS, which is just silly. So if you bring in one kind of bat like that that stabilizes everything a little bit, provides a little bit more protection for guys that are performing, like, Judge and then Rizzo, and it just balances things out a lot more. So you're not just getting a feast or famine type of bat.
That's been Hicks's hole, is that when he can't get it together, it's bad. He can't make contact. He's hitting really soft ground balls, like not hitting the ball. So then that on top of his walk rate being low, where his walk rate used to be like his most valuable asset, honestly,
Yeah.
aside from his elite level arm, which is no longer elite level. It's still good, but it's not 106.
Yeah. Did you
But
see what his Statcast numbers were for his arm last season though? They were like freaky good. I was
really,
like, he was like 96, I think 97th, 98th percentile for like he was in deep red for Baseball Savant.
yeah.
So like his arm is fully back at this point. It's just a matter of like it's not enough because he's not making good routes to the ball. He's dropping balls in the outfield. So it like you can tell there's a lack of focus there. So it cancels out any good that you're getting out of his arm.
If you only read Statcast and you only watched baseball in 2018 and 2019, the Yankees outfield of Judge, Hicks, and Gallo must have been you must have been salivating over that.
Until you see the Blues with K rate and stuff like that.
We ignore those numbers. And the
Oh yeah.
Yankees did for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we'll see what we get with left field. I actually let me transition into this. So I want to go through our position player roster. And not too in-depth analysis. I'm gonna give you a position and we're gonna alternate. We're gonna say who we think is gonna play the most games at that position for us next year. So not
Cool.
like the majority, just whoever has like at that one position, whoever has the most appearances, the most, I'll say starts or innings, whatever. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. We're not measuring this. Let's start at catcher.
Trevi.
Yep. Maybe. At first base, I'm gonna say Rizzo, God willing.
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
Second base is tough. I'm thinking Volpe. I'm just gonna go out and say it.
Really?
Yeah, hot take.
No, I'm kind of with you. I'm just so intrigued with how they're gonna do it. Like
Yeah.
I think second base is gonna be a bunch of like 30 to 60 game options.
It'll be very equally distributed if assuming things stay kind of pat with the roster as it is and Volpe comes up as well. But in my mind, Torres is gone. I just don't see him sticking around. And I think that the Yankees at this point, like they want to give Volpe the nod as much as possible. And the only way to do that, look at what happened with Jeremy Pena last season, is throwing him into the fire and saying, like, it's your time.
I,
So
I think it's gonna end up being DJ like 70 games,
yeah.
Volpe like 50, and then probably Glaber. I don't think Glaber gets traded in the offseason. Maybe. I don't know. That's like my hunch. Because I think Volpe might fly around the infield too.
Yeah, it's tough with Glaber. That's the whole thing is it's holding up this entire situation right now because there is such a
If
like
they
we're
stick
a
to
lot of
Glaber, he plays second base for 130 games plus.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if he's on the team, he's the starting second baseman. Like
Yeah.
it's at the end of the day, like he'll get the most reps. But just in terms of salary and things like that, and just like the entire fit of the infield and how they're really pushing the youth movement, I just don't see it anymore. And I think that like DJ is going to get his reps, but at a different position.
Yeah.
So
Speaking of third base,
DJ,
I also think DJ.
yeah,
How many? I think DJ gets like 80 at third.
I'm gonna go with like 95.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think his arm will look at third? Hopefully he's healthy for the full year, but that's a lot of time for he hasn't done that scale
Yeah.
at third base for us yet.
What makes me hopeful is he's never had any arm issues. Like it doesn't seem like he has obviously the best arm,
It's all lower
I'm
body.
Yeah, it's all been lower body stuff, which is obviously a concern on its own, but he hasn't had like a Trevor Story problem where it's like he's bottom 1 or 2% of like throwing velocity, where you can see like there was clearly something wrong there. I think that DJ is just so smooth over there. Like he makes that quick little turn, you know what I mean? Like where he like digs his throwing hand into the ground, turns around real quick, pivots, and throws the ball across the diamond. I think he's just so accurate that he's not going to have that problem unless maybe someone who's like Julio Rodriguez throwing running down the line on like a softly hit ball. Like that's when you might see a few issues, and it's like the top 99 percentile like sprinters versus his arm. But he's going to make everything routine look so easy, just because like that's the type of player he is. I don't expect too much flashiness in terms of like lateral movements or anything like that, but he gets the job done, and that's like what you can ask from him.
And ultimately, the bat is so much more important. So
Exactly.
he'll be solid enough. Like Donaldson had a really good, like great defensive year. I think DJ's bat above Donaldson is more valuable than Donaldson's glove above DJ's at third.
And their gloves were comparable last year.
Yeah.
Like if you look at it at the end of the day. So like I would take a healthy DJ with his bat any day over Donaldson at this point. Not to say that Donaldson can't bounce back, but it's also very unlikely with the swings that he was taking last season.
Yeah. Shortstop.
Peraza.
Yeah. I think Peraza gets like 110 games.
And another hot take is like if Glaber's not traded, IKF is. That's like where my mind goes.
I think they almost have to for like the 40 man.
There's such a logjam in the middle infield, and the thing is, like beyond Volpe and Peraza, you still have guys that are in the infield, like Roderick Arias, that's like a few like way down the line. But then you've got Trey Sweeney, who's like pretty close at this point. He's probably a few years away. Like they're going to have to start making decisions on their infielders, and I think this is the first year where they're going to really feel the pressure to do that. And we'll get into the outfield stuff as well because that all ties into it. But I think we're going to see some tough decisions and guys that are younger starting to make their waves.
Yeah, and on the 26th man right now, the bench is full, and that's with two middle infielders, that being IKF and DJ listed on the bench.
Mm-hmm.
So if Volpe comes up, one of them has to go. And then if there's a different left field option, Reynolds, Profar, we're gonna have to get rid of either one of them, or we're gonna have to get rid of Hicks or Oswaldo somehow.
Yeah.
So all right, right field.
Judge.
I pray to God.
Well, what makes me very, very fucking hopeful is the fact that he played how many games in center field last year? He played how many games in right field last year, and then he DH'd a little bit. And he's played 154 games, and like, yeah, it was a contract year, but he did it the year before as well. And all of his injuries have been kind of freakish in the last, like, he hasn't had an injury in 3 years now, essentially 2.5. But the ones that he did have back in 2020, 2019, and even 2018, hit by a pitch, breaks his wrist sliding, like things that are not just soft tissue, which is what Stanton, for example, has been dealing with. So at this point, I think his body is able to sustain playing in the outfield like long term.
Me too. And I think he only plays like 120 in right field, 20 games at DH.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe rest. Probably more. He'll probably play like 150. So maybe 130 games in right.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads us into center field.
Harrison Bader.
Yeah. Probably like
And this is
150, honestly, in
this is
center. God
another
willing.
very like I think that like if he does put up 135 games, we could easily see like a 3 or 4 year extension for him.
Yep.
Because like he's a perfect fit organizationally. He's a New York City kid. His personality just fits the entire persona of like being a Yankee. He comes from a winning culture already with St. Louis. Like it just seems like he is the perfect guy to fill in, and like he hasn't actually hit his ceiling yet, which is really exciting because he's never played, I think, 115 plus games,
Yep.
like consistently throughout his career. So if he can just prove that he can stay healthy, the plantar fasciitis isn't an issue, he's going to make the Yankees make a lot of very difficult decisions because I do see him forcing their hand, and that will like play into the whole Dominguez situation and Elijah Dunham, and who is well Estevan Florial he's out of options. So another guy that's going to have an immediate impact because of that.
Yep.
Or he's going to be impacted immediately at least.
Yeah, I think this is the one space where the Yankees can spin themselves into pushing for Reynolds, because you look at the Yankees center field options, backup
Yeah.
center field options. Florial out of options, proven he can't really hit well at a major league level right now. Not for a win now team. Judge, who you just gave 9-year contract to at 30 years old, who can do it. We know he can do it. Do you want to do that to him?
No.
Hicks or Dominguez, Spencer Jones? I don't think they
So
project as center fielders. So I think that's where you can go, okay, we get Reynolds. If
yeah.
Bader doesn't play 162, which he hasn't proven that he can yet, I think he could, that like our backup center fielder is covered by like an MLB center fielder.
Yeah. So I think it's like worth extending Bader alone for the sake of having him in the playoffs and having him down
Yep.
the push, because he's proven already that he's fantastic out there. And that does make left field kind of this space where you can be a little luxurious with the way that you want to go about it. I think that's why Reynolds at this point is viable. And a lot of Yankees fans need to kind of accept the fact that Dominguez might not be the answer there anymore because you have another guy right behind him, Spencer Jones, who is bumping on his door. And he's coming up, I think, quicker than anyone anticipated him to.
And
He
they
was
would both
initially,
have to play left field because
yeah.
they're not going to be center fielders at the MLB level. And Aaron Judge is playing right field for 9 years, and Giancarlo Stanton is our DH for another 7.
And which one is younger? Which one is more lucrative looking to other teams? That would be
I
Dominguez.
guess.
And I mean, I showed you this a few days ago, but I mean, granted, the pandemic season and all that in the lockout kind of played an impact. So like you have to take it with like a bit of a grain of salt. But Juan Soto came up about the same age as Dominguez, was drafted at 16 years old, played single A, then double A, and then went straight into the majors. And now you have Dominguez at the same age, 18, 19 years old. That's when Soto got popped up into the majors as at 19. So because of COVID and all that, it complicates things a little bit. But his clock is ticking, like whether we like it or not. And obviously, we hope that he's going to be everything that everyone hoped for. But like, you can't expect him to be the next Mike Trout and all that. That's just not realistic. If he turns into what Reynolds is right now, every Yankees fan will be ecstatic. But if a lot of people, for whatever reason, are upset if like he's even brought up in trade talks for Reynolds, who's a proven MLB not a superstar, but he's an all-star at this point, who I think, in my opinion, has the ceiling to become one given the right protection in the lineup. So there's a lot of things and factors that go into it that I think we just have to be able to willing to accept and be open-minded about. Because I'm not saying that Dominguez should be traded necessarily, but I think out of all the young top prospects, he's easily the most viable and he makes the most sense to be moved.
And he's the only one that can go that doesn't murder our farm for a big talent.
Because we've got outfield depth.
Yep, exactly. And we
Yeah.
have a lack of need, except for the most interesting one of this scenario that I'm doing right now, left field. Who do you think?
I'm gonna go safe and say Profar. I think he ends up becoming a Yankee because the steam has picked up within the net last day or so. And it just seems like once a name is correlated with Yankees and free agency this season, the only one that I think they missed on was Benintendi. You know what I mean? I think he's the only name that they missed on because his years that he wanted was so high, 5 years, 75 million.
I'm not mad
They
about
didn't want
that.
to go that fifth year, but
Yep.
they didn't miss on Judge and they didn't miss on Rodon. Those were the two targets they had in free agency that they wanted. I think they do ultimately want Profar just because they've liked him for a long time and they're not necessarily thrilled that he's the guy, but it's a pretty solid consolation because it is a tick up from an Aaron Hicks and they've liked him for a long time. And if they're interested and they're engaged with him at this point, I think that they get a deal done within the next week or so.
How many games, roughly?
Maybe 100, if that. I
So
think there's going to be a lot of weird splitting.
So my thinking is like I think so. My answer, I'm gonna. It's not a cop out. It's a legit option. I'm gonna say Oswaldo Cabrera. I don't think anyone plays more than 50 games in left field.
Okay, you see, that's like the other option I was thinking.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be like 40 for Oswaldo, 35 to 50 for Hicks. Because he'll probably get traded. Because he also,
Yeah.
I think he'll get traded mid-season because the Yankees will have him get the 10-5 rights. Because I
Hmm.
think I have to see when he hit. I think he hits that before the trade deadline, and which he
Yeah.
would have a full no trade clause, but that would just be, um, he would
You know,
accept a trade if he's
he'll
not
accept.
playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he came out to the media. He'll accept a trade.
And there's
Um,
30 other, there's 29 other teams that I'd be willing to help win.
yeah. I think Giancarlo picks up 40 games between Fenway, Houston, Philly, like some of the new National League ballparks we're gonna be playing in a bit more. Um, and then maybe like a trade deadline piece. Ryan Reynolds might end up with 50 games if he's a deadline piece.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think no one plays. I'll say no one plays over 60. I think there
Mhm.
could be a few that play around 50.
I will say one of the other reasons I like Reynolds is because same reason I like Glaber too is he stays healthy.
Yep.
He's not been an injured player, and like he's
Mhm.
played 4 seasons in league so far, and he has an OPS over 800 in those 4 seasons. So like
On a
this is
team
like,
that doesn't need him
yeah,
to play
easy,
160 games because they're not trying to be competitive,
exactly.
or they
And
they haven't been.
yeah, and well, that's another reason too. Like I think the best case scenario with the infield is if you move not only Glaber but also like an IKF, so that way you have um Cabrera as like your true utility bench piece,
Yep.
you know, and then that way you have an ability to not just bring in Reynolds, but you can sign Profar as well and have him be another Swiss Army knife. So there are different ways to go about it that still end with the Yankees not only staying under the luxury tax, but also getting better. And that's the exciting thing about it. We just have to like, I think we're going to see moves within the coming weeks. It just feels like that lull is starting to come to a head. But at the same time, we just need a little bit more patience because like the whole doom and gloom thing that Yankees fans have been going through, it's like cycles of grief and stuff. I just think it's a little too early to pass that judgment because it at the end of the day, it still is what we've got one more week of January left, and then it starts to get into go time. So I think we need to just kind of let things play out right now.
Last thing, because I'm intrigued by it on my screen. The Yankees have four position players listed in the Fangraphs top 100. Who do you think they are?
Oh, for MLB,
Yeah, MLB players top
not
100.
pipeline or anything. Okay, definitely Judge, obviously
Judge, where do you think he ranks?
too.
He's number one
Hell yeah,
listed
there you
here.
go.
Big red bold letters. I like it. Fangraphs.
Before Otani.
I assume so, unless Otani's number zero,
Okay.
which he might be.
I don't know. Gets a special rule for
If
him.
anyone's number zero, it's Otani.
Yeah. Let's see. So you've got Judge Rizzo. I'd assume is on there.
Rizzo is next. He's ranked 56th.
Okay. Cole.
Position players only. So
Oh,
they have
okay.
Cole at 4 and Rodon at 6.
There we go. Yeah, Stanton.
Stan is not in it.
Wow. Okay. DJ.
DJ is 95th. So
Yeah,
you're
well, there we
missing
go.
the one between DJ and Rizzo.
I feel like I'm missing someone so like brutally
Well,
like
I think it's
Glaber's.
interesting. It's Glaber,
Yeah, that's like that's the only one that makes sense.
66th.
That's pretty high.
That's really high.
I think it's mainly like I said, like so much of it comes down to the amount of games he plays. He's able to like we have to remember that he put up two really bad seasons
Yeah.
in 2020 and 2021.
Hmm.
So I can't just say he's guaranteed to give you a 750 OPS, but assuming he's in the right headspace, he can give you at least a 750 OPS.
Yeah, and he and Judge are the only two that are projected to give 600 at bats in the season. With
Mm.
the next being Bader at 560. So that's part of it. The scale, he's a
And
WAR accumulator, a games accumulator, RBI. Um, and he makes sense. He's been a mainstay in our lineup since early 2018.
Yeah. Oh, I've got a question for you.
Mhm.
Do you think Ben Rortvedt gets an actual chance?
No. um.
The guy, like, if he's healthy,
Well,
I
what do you mean an actual chance? Like in the spring, he's gonna play a ton.
yeah. So like, I think that there's a chance
Oh,
that
interesting.
another person that could potentially be moved, and I don't know if this is the case, but
That would make me
Higgy's
so
got a little
sad.
bit of trade value.
You're right, but it would make me so sad. Well, the thing is, I think Higgy's biggest value is as like an emotional support catcher on the
Yeah.
Yankees. I mean, he's great defensively. That undermines his ability. Like pitchers like him, but part of the reason that he's an emotional support catcher is because of their rapport with him.
He's a
Um,
calming factor to like
yeah,
throw into any battery.
yeah. So, I don't know, but liking Higgy as a person and as a professional, I mean, if Rortvedt is just as good defensively as people say he is, that could just be the better option. But the fact that you have Trevino who can give you 120 starts at catcher, I don't know. I don't see Rortvedt as a need. I would rather a stable, comfortable piece for these pitchers than a new defensive guru again.
True. I just see like because Trevi, he kind of came out of nowhere with his offense. It almost felt like lightning in a bottle, but also it's like he tapped into something that just wasn't there before, or that someone kind of showed him was there. He just needed to find it the entire time. I feel like they're going to try to do the same thing with Rortvedt too, because he is a lefty batter, and the dude's fucking jacked.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I see them trying to, get him to like compel him into being like a guy that swings for right field consistently. So that way he can play like 60 to 100 games and still get 10 pops, you know?
We need Higgy to not hit 9 homers in the spring, so that way he actually has some save for the season, but also hit a few to remind Ben Rortvedt who's boss.
Yeah.
But he can't be our best spring training hitter again because that didn't work out for him well last time.
Hit won the first day of spring training, won the middle day, and then won the last day, and I'll be happy.
Yeah. Spring training legends include Kyle Higashioka and Greg Bird in recent history. So those went down well.
I got
Um,
to see Bubba Crosby back in the '04 spring training, which
yep.
was great because that was A-Rod's first year too.
I'm excited for spring. I'm excited to watch the first 3 games and then remember that I don't really care that much. And then and then
Like,
see
his
once we get
baseball's
like
back.
2-3 weeks in, whoever's still on the roster, I'll be intrigued.
That's the thing is I'm curious to see like some of these moves might come during spring training because like in recent memory Luke Voigt got traded during spring training. Sean Manaea had that whole thing where he got traded from the A's to the Padres during the same right before their game they played against each other.
Yeah. Well, that
In
was the
Arizona.
lockout year, remember? Like
Yeah,
coming out of it.
yeah.
Oh, I don't know. What I
So
liked, what they did, and they couldn't do this year because of planning, but the last real spring training with a full offseason of planning, was 2020. Or it wasn't even a full, it was like 3 weeks, but they were doing like a lot of mic'd up sessions.
yeah,
Um, and I really love that. I hope that comes back because spring training is so boring otherwise, but like
mhm.
guys fully during the game. I understand it's a bit awkward on like Sunday night baseball wanting to do it. And some of what they say isn't that, important or relevant to the game, but in spring training when they can like relax and it's, pro contract guys who aren't competing, I think it's fun having like Pete Alonso, Freddie Freeman, Trey Turner, Harrison Bader, like do mic'd up sessions.
Rizzo versus Freeman's always like a great
Yeah.
little matchup.
But my girlfriend loves Rizzo because she says that he so obviously just has ADHD, but is like the best about it. Like just the way that he fidgets and talks and stuff. Because she also has ADHD, so she relates a lot to him and how he like experiences the game of baseball and keeps himself busy basically and entertained.
Fan and focus, yeah.
Yeah. All right, that's all I got on my list. Anything you want to get off your chest before we break?
We covered a lot today. I think the one last thing that we didn't talk about, that we can just blaze by real quick is relieving.
Yeah.
Relievers, I think they are due for one more arm. Andrew Chafin feels like a really nice fit, but like who knows how expensive he's going to be. That's another thing. If they sign another free agent arm, I think they're going to have to make another trade just to clear that roster spot and then also clear salary as well. So hopefully that comes out soon as well. Unless they do make it. The thing with the Yankees is one place that I feel like we can both put some trust in them is with the bullpen. Just
Yeah.
their ability to find arms for dirt cheap in like AAA or like off waivers or something, then turn them into gold. So I'm not concerned about that personally, but I would like to see them add one more lefty because they did lose Lidke.
Yeah, and Wandy isn't even like that lefty. I mean, Wandy's really good, so you'll have him
I
play
trust,
against lefties.
yeah, I trust him more against righties, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. He's more reverse place, which I think Canely is similar, right? Isn't Canely
Yeah,
like really good against lefties?
because his changeup is disgusting. Like it's probably
So
the
it's
best game.
is Canely our lefty specialist and Wandy our righty specialist, and the rest of them are like straight up.
As of right now, yes.
Yeah. We love modern baseball.
Who needs a Mike Myers lefty specialist submariner when you've
Mm.
got Tommy Canley?
That was the one thing when we were going over Miami that
Yeah.
intrigued me about Trevor Rogers.
hmm
Um, it'd just be different, like just a different arm angle, like
Yeah.
a lefty from the National League that just hasn't had the
hmm
exposure. Um, not quite the same as his twin brother, who what is Tyler Rogers the submariner, or is that
Trevor,
Trevor?
right? No, Trevor
Is
Rogers, and then Taylor Rogers is the lefty.
Taylor Rogers? Aren't they both lefties?
No, Trevor is a righty submariner.
Hold on, let's figure this out.
I want to say Taylor
Oh yeah,
is,
Trevor Rogers is the righty submariner. Yeah,
and then Taylor is like a 3/4 lefty.
yeah. Oh no, yeah. Trevor is a 3/4 lefty. Yeah, and then Tyler is the. That's interesting that he's a righty.
Yeah, right. His stuff is so disgusting.
Yeah.
Um, Another guy that we talked about like a week ago, just because I got to meet him briefly, is Jose Cuas
hmm
from the Kansas City Royals. I met at Ottavino's camp, and dude, he's awesome. Like, if anyone has never heard the name Jose Cuas before, pitcher for the Royals. He's about 27, 28 years old, New York kid. Had his first full season last year. Like, look him up. He's like devastating with his arm slot. Throws from like a little bit of a sidearm, 95, 96 from the right side with a slider that moves probably 30, 32 inches horizontal.
Yeah. I haven't seen him pitch yet. Oh, no, he probably pitched with. He might have
Mm,
pitched with. No, he's younger. With Betances, he went to Grand Street but missed him.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder because Charlie, who you also saw, Charlie's also in the Royals org. So
Yeah,
maybe the Yankees pick up Charlie. Though I don't
that'd
think
be
he's pro
fun.
ready yet, but that would be fun.
Just
Like,
have him, what, for Tampa Tarpons or something like that.
yeah. Shout out Chuck.
Shout out Chuck, shout out Jose.
Yeah, I'm excited to have Canley back. That's
He's
the
so
big
much
one.
fun.
Right now, the only unsigned free agents that were on the Yankees last year are four relievers. It's Chapman, Britton, Chad Green, and who was the fourth one? He was on the 40. Jacob Barnes.
Mm.
So they're still out there. Chad Green, I'd be intrigued about, but I know there's the injury, obviously.
Would you take Britton back on like a $2 million deal for
Two
1 year?
million, yes. Yes.
That's like because he is coming off that injury. Like he had two. I think he came back too fast last year, got injured again. But when he is healthy, the thing is, it takes him forever to actually find his command in his arm slot.
Yeah.
Once he does, he's disgusting. Um, if he's willing to take something that low, because I think he was on like a 13 million a year AAV deal before, which is just way too much for him
I would
nowadays.
even take him on a 3-4 year, 3-4 million, and then like
Testing off.
60 day him, give him a minor league assignment to find it.
Yeah,
Because his changeup to lefties is that can be the saw.
his two seamer is like a goddamn bowling ball.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So if he's able to command this stuff even remotely, like that's awesome.
Yeah.
It sounds like the Mets are interested, so I think that he probably does end up in New York City. It's just a matter of which team.
Probably. Because they'll give him like 5 or 6.
Yeah,
No problem. And he's
yeah.
been here a while. The one thing that the Yankees like Britton, I know he's been away from the team for a while, but he was a player rep and he was high up in the union and stuff. Like he's very respected. He was really good with like teaching some of the young guys when he came over as a reliever, and also being like a top like playoff level like closer for the Orioles, and then coming to the Yankees to not be the closer. Um, Up against like a bad guy, like someone who I wouldn't blame if he was angry about not pitching over.
Yeah.
Um, like that takes a lot of professionalism and respect. So I think he would humble himself, take lower money to stay, but it
He
hasn't
also had
happened yet.
he also had a .54 ERA 1 year, which is just like disgusting.
Yep, 2015, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Legendary.
He was like top 3 in Cy Young that year, right?
I mean, like if a closer is ever going to win it, I think there have been a few.
That was the year because he
Schultz-
wasn't just closing; it was like high leverage spots throughout the year. And the
yeah,
Orioles like weren't, they weren't in the Dodgers. They were like a mid 90s win team to get the East. Like the different, like he probably had like a 5 WAR, like a 4 WAR as a reliever.
yeah. Who did we give up for him that offseason for 2018? Or it was
Wasn't
in
he a
the
free
middle
agent
of the
signing?
season. It was a trade deadline.
You traded for him.
Yeah, because I remember I was in Tokyo
Yeah.
and they picked him up, and they were. I think that's the year that they were looking at Machado potentially for a trade deadline, and he ended up with the Dodgers.
Dylan Tate, Cody Carroll, and Josh Rogers.
Dylan Tate's good too.
Yep.
So I mean that trade worked out beautifully for the Yankees overall.
Wow. Yeah. Dylan Tate and Trenton Thunder uniform. I just pulled up from 2018.
Funky.
Yeah. All right. I think that's everything from us, though.
Yep.
So thanks for tuning in. I know it's been a bit slow. This is probably 2 weeks from when you last heard us. But we'll be back soon. We got some fun stuff for you coming up leading into the season. We're gonna do some positional and some team previews. We might have some interesting special guests that are in our pocket right now. So you'll be hearing those soon. Make sure to share with your friends, especially if you hear some new people. We're gonna get some new audiences, hopefully, that are intrigued. And yeah, let's go Yankees, and let's hope that they fill in some of these holes.
Go Yanks.
See ya.